Good afternoon, and welcome to today's webinar, The 3 Key Components to Business Trust. My name is Caitlin Mutzelberg from CCIQ, and I'm your facilitator for today. Alongside me, I'm delighted to welcome Tony Curl from Think and Grow Business. This webinar will explore successful businesses and how they build trust, and in so doing, unlock the 3 key concepts that will enable you to drive greater success in your business by applying these principles to your business. You will have some clear action steps that will help you deliver better for your business in this critical area. First, some tips to get the most from today's session. We will be online for about 40 minutes, and following the main presentation, there will be an opportunity for questions and answers. Please send your questions for Tony through using the text box on screen. At the end of the presentation, we will collate all the questions and Tony will answer as many as he can. Following this session, we will email all participants a copy of the presentation, a link, and additional supporting information. So please check your inboxes later today. So now I'm going to hand over to Tony from Think and Grow Business to take you through today's webinar, the 3 key components to business trust.
Hey there, I'm Tony from Think and Grow Business, and welcome to today's webinar where we will be talking about the 3 key components to building trust within the business. But first a little bit about me. My name's Tony Curl from Think and Grow Business. I'm a leadership development and business coach. I have a number of international certifications, one with the Dr. John C. Maxwell, who is the #1 leadership expert in the world today and has been for a number of years, and a gentleman called Dr. Steve Maraboli, who resides and is a behavioural scientist in New York. My background is in retail. I've spent 30 years in corporate retail leadership experience, and you will see and hear some of those stories as we work through this particular webinar today. Today, I will cover for you sharing 2 success stories out of the research and the experiences that I've had. We'll be looking at the economic model that sits behind trust. We'll be exploring the 3 key components, and we'll be providing some hints and tips as to where to start. Trust is a word, and it gets bandied around quite a lot. We know it when we see it, but we feel it when it's not there. And in the business world, it's something that's very clear to me that we need to have. We enjoy doing business with people that we trust, but it's more than enjoyment, because we do better business with people that we trust. There's an economic model for trust, and you will explore and we'll learn all about that today. So experience has shown me that the benefits of building trust in all relationships are immense. The benefits are huge, but I've also felt the pain when that trust has been broken. And this information I'll share with you today will give you a foundation for building and looking for trust. The first story I want to share with you is in relation to Bunnings Warehouse. And I call it creating an Aussie icon. And you can see on your screens now and this is all publicly available information. So I'm not sharing anything that's confidential. I'm not sharing anything that's lacking in integrity. This graph is available on the Bunnings website, and it shows the Bunnings success story both from a sales and an EBIT dollars perspective from 1995 through to 2015. And as you can see, I'm pretty certain there's not one business listening to this that wouldn't want a graph that looked like that. You can see they started back in, the very first warehouse was built in 1994, and as you can see from 1995 they were profitable. So they made a profit from day one. They're an amazing business, and that's an incredible chart. You can see a slight raise in 2002, which was the acquisition of the BBC Hardware House business that I'm hoping some of you will have remembered. So in 2002 we acquired the Hardware House business and we saw that big kick. But you can see year-on growth in both sales and EBIT. Now we know Bunnings was sausage chisels. Bunnings has sort of become the word that we use now instead of hardware store. And On a weekend, some of our favourite activities are all about the 3 Bs, you know, beach, Bunnings and barbecues. But you can see that they've got a huge track record of success that it just sits staring at us right now. They've got this consistency that most business can only yearn for. And it's underpinned by a couple of very key critical points. It's underpinned by a very strong business model, but it's also underpinned by this concept of trust. So let me just share that with you. When we look at the business drivers of Bunnings, and you can see in that picture, it's not underpinned by Bob the Builder. However, in saying that, that picture represents to me, that's a picture of myself with Bob the Builder, and that was taken at the reopening of the Bunnings Rocklea after the 2011 floods. And we were flooded in January, and we reopened in March. So in between that time, the team gutted, rebuilt and reopened in just 3 months. After 3 metres of water went through that particular store. And that typified the teamwork that Bunnings has. They empower the teams and the individuals. And it's very, very simple and it's very clear. The team that I led at Rocklea was one of the highlights of my career, and the outcome that we had was the result of many things. But to me, it was the visible sign of what the vision is. The vision of Bunnings is we are building the best. Our team makes it happen. We are building the best. Our team makes it happen. So just within that phrase creates the concept of we trust the team to build the best. And we recognise our team that we're building the best. See, many visions and mission statements do nothing more than just gather dust, but this one is one that's lived daily in the business, and one that came truly to light when we were rebuilding the Bunnings at Rocklea. And also my colleagues down the road at Bunnings Oxley, as we were both being rebuilt at the same time. Bunnings truly sees everyone as a trusted member of the team, and they're all working towards becoming the best. One of the other main drivers is their strategy: lowest price, widest range, best service. And that hasn't changed. That has never changed. Lowest prices is just the beginning, has never changed. The strategy is simple. Now, in some ways it's contradictory because many businesses can't offer lowest price and best service. To have lowest price, you have to have lowest cost. And for some people, that would mean not having experts on the floor to be able to provide the best possible service that they can for their customers. So by having those 3 pillars within their strategy, lowest price, widest range, best service, they build trust within their customers. And they deliver. The last component, the last driver is, which is a little less known, less well known, but Bunnings have a very clear and strong leadership model within the business. And it's all about leadership to build and create the vision for the business. Now, the leadership model is something that is used every single day in that business. John Gillam, the CEO, used to use it as a business planning model. He used to use it whenever there was some new initiatives that he wanted to explore. He would work through the leadership model of that particular business to ascertain whether it was the right thing to do. Now, one of the core components, one of the foundation blocks of that leadership model is building trust, the concept of building trust. Sitting there within that leadership model, the desired behaviours of the leaders of that business in the way that they build relationships with their team, their suppliers and their customers. And what those 3 areas of building trust helps their team, their strategy, and it stood the test of time, their leadership model, they've all got a strong component of trust. And as the company and as Bunnings built trust in those areas, they filled up what I call the trust bucket. They add to their trust bucket. So what happens when you add to your trust bucket, the more you can fill the trust bucket, the more likely it is that someone's going to forgive you if you stuff up. And let's face it, we're all humans and we all stuff up at some way, shape or form. But Bunnings are able to keep their trust bucket filled with their customers, their team and their suppliers, so that when they do stuff up, where they're likely to be forgiven. So, but other businesses don't top up the trust bucket. And when it empties, unfortunately, so does their business in a lot of cases. So Bunnings have built a very strong, consistent growth style business with a very strong pillar and a very strong underline or a foundation of trust. The other story that I'll share with you is, you may know the gentleman on screen. The gentleman's Warren Buffett. He's one of the most trusted, influential and richest business people in the world. So back in 2004, he was the CEO of Berkshire Hathaway, and they acquired a company called McLean Distribution from Walmart. So it wasn't a small purchase. McLean Distribution by itself was a $23 billion company. And an acquisition of that size would usually take months. The due diligence, the meetings, the to and fro, the negotiations. And the cost of acquisition would have extended into the millions. But because Walmart and Berkshire Hathaway operated in an environment of high trust, they were able to make the deal in a single 2-hour meeting. What? A $23 billion business sold in a single 2-hour meeting. The deal was completed in less than a month, and it saved Berkshire Hathaway millions of dollars. Now, that story is part of Stephen M.R. Covey's book called The Speed of Trust. And it can also be verified in the 2004 annual report for Berkshire Hathaway, where Warren Buffett talked about it. He said, "We expected everything to be as Walmart had said it would be, and it was." Now, I don't share that for you to suddenly say, I'm not going to do due diligence, because due diligence is something that you should be doing. But I share it because of the advantages that businesses can have and do have when they operate in that world of high trust. It's a vivid example of what can happen when you work in that world. And let's face it, Buffett's not dumb. He didn't become the richest man in the world by making dumb decisions. So in a situation like that, it saved him money. It brought the business in. The acquisition was completed much quicker. But the key thing with trust is you know it when you see it, and you feel it when you don't. You know, and some of those statements that you see on the screen in front of you now, I've been burned before, but how can I ever trust anyone again, is happening every day in the workforce. It also happens every day in relationships. It happens every day with people looking for love. I've been burned before, so how can I ever trust anyone again? My boss micromanages me and everyone at work. He treats us like we can't be trusted. So the consequences of the boss's actions are that the team are feeling they can't be trusted. I have to walk on eggshells with my major client. It always feels like I'm giving in, but I can't afford to lose them. You know, I've seen a number of businesses within that aspect. When you're working with trust, it brings confidence. When you work with distrust, it brings suspicion. And you know the feeling. You know the feeling you get when you don't trust someone. It's a gut instinct. It's something that just sits there. You can't necessarily pinpoint the reasons why. You're just thinking, oh, this isn't right. But the more comfortable you are, the more confident you are that you're working in trust, that trust builds. And unlocking that trust equation gives you a competitive advantage. And that looks a little bit like this. It says the economic model of trust is when you operate in a high trust environment, you will create high speed and low cost. So high trust equals high speed and low cost. When you're working in a low trust environment, you're working with low speed and high cost. And it's pretty easy here to get an example. So I compare the Warren Buffett example with anyone out there that deals with government, any government department. So governments are bureaucratic, and they're bureaucratic for a reason, because they've got to be transparent, they've got to make sure every box is ticked, they've got to cover the lowest common denominator, the people that are trying to rip them off. So I can understand to a degree that they need to be bureaucratic. But what they do is that they create complexity around what it is. They create a bureaucracy, and anyone who deals with government knows that it's painfully slow and frustrating. So the economic model of high trust equals high speed and low cost is a clear contrast to what we normally see within any sort of government function. But there's another model that I just want to share with you as well, and this is the strategy and execution model. Now, once again, those models come out of that Covey book that I was telling you. It's called The Speed of Trust. And he followed that up with a book called The Smart Trust. So they're both incredibly good reads about how you can really build it and take advantage of the trust equation. But traditionally, what happens with the execution model is that strategy multiplied by execution delivers good results. So good strategy multiplied by good execution equals good results. It also works when you're talking about bad strategy and bad execution equals good results. And there's varying degrees on the results based around that strategy and the execution. But when you place trust into that equation, it looks a little bit like good strategy multiplied by good execution multiplied by high trust equals superior results. So when we look at it like that, operating in a world of high trust, you create a dividend for your business. A dividend which dramatically increases the effectiveness of the business. It dramatically increases the cost advantages that you may have. When you operate in a low trust environment, it's like a tax, and it compromises the best strategies and operational processes. It makes good business sense, but it's also the realm of the few. So you may have one or two business relationships where you operate in a trusted environment, or you want to expand that, but very few businesses hit that ultimate realm where they operate with all their suppliers or all their customers in a high trust environment. So, but it is available, and there is a process that you can follow. So the three key components. The first one is about being trustworthy yourself, and I'll go through these in a bit more detail once I click through this slide. The second component is about character, and the third component is about competence. So the three key components to building business trust is being trustworthy, character, and competence. So when we talk about being trustworthy, because people will come up to me and say, Tony, how do I build trust? And the first thing I always ask is, well, it starts with, are you trustworthy? And it's such a simple concept to me. To build trust, the only place to start is to be trustworthy. And it sounds simple, but we miss it. Some people will miss it. Now, the first two components are incredibly strongly aligned, character and then trustworthy. And you cannot build trust if you yourself cannot be trusted. Once again, it sounds really simple, but it gets missed by so many people. So people are looking to build trust for people to trust them, but not necessarily looking back in the mirror, which is where you need to be starting the whole process. Am I trustworthy? Am I someone that can be trusted? The second part is about character, and we've got two parts in this particular component. We talk about integrity and we talk about intent. So integrity is driven by behaviours and action. And integrity is what people see. Integrity is what people see. You can tell them as much as you want that you've got integrity, but they won't believe you until you show it. So your actions are the key, and they must align with your words. You can imagine the uproar if there was a company out there that was spruiking on about their environmental status, and they were suddenly discovered that they were disposing of waste in a pristine stream in a wilderness area. You can imagine the uproar. But that uproar is just as great when you say you're going to do something and you don't do something. It has the same impact. You lose trust. So with integrity, are you congruent? Do you walk the talk? Are your values clear to you? Am I open to learning new truths about me and my values? And do I keep commitments? in many ways, I see the behaviour of someone as adding the validation of your gut instinct. You know, I've worked with people who I just haven't trusted. You've got that gut instinct, you're not quite sure, you can't pinpoint it, but then one day suddenly you go, there it is. And it's something that they've done that has breached that concept of integrity and trust, but it validates your gut experience. And there's no doubt that you've probably seen or felt something that was quite similar. When we talk about intent, we talk about what is my agenda. Agenda is huge, you know, and once again, many leaders don't get this. It doesn't matter how much credibility someone has, if they continue to discount if you continue to discount their agenda, their credibility means nothing. And the same with you. Your credibility means nothing if someone's discounting your agenda or is looking for the hidden agenda in your actions. You know, I believe when someone sits there and says, trust me, that's probably a precursor that they're looking at the wrong intent. Trust and intent, once again, comes from actions. And there's a tax here. When we enter in negotiations with someone, a business, a supplier, and all we want is a win for us, there's a tax to that, because that negotiation is going to take longer and it's going to become more heated potentially, and you know, you may end up with a company that walks away because there's not much point them being in negotiations with you if all you want to see is you win. So it's only when you want them to win as well that it becomes true negotiation. So it's become a bit of an art of thrust and counter thrust. We're scared of leaving the table, and you know, at the end of the day, that's business. But why don't you try and determine what your winning point is, and then have a look at what their winning point is, and then maybe enter negotiations that way. So do I discount others' intent due to my suspicion? What tax do I pay because of others questioning my intent? And how can I improve communicating my intent? And once again, the challenge is to communicate your intent through actions as opposed to words. The last component is called competence. And we look at capabilities and we look at results. So what capabilities do I have that build credibility and inspire trust and confidence? What experience do I have in developing those capabilities and develop confidence in myself? Am I relevant to the business world of today? And that's a tough question that's being asked right around the world. Can I say right around the world? Am I relevant in the business world today? There's a lot of businesses out there trying to make old methods work, making old methods work. So ask yourself, are you up to date with what's happening in your industry, your marketplace, and the business? Are there new models that you're not embracing? And what is my attitude then in developing myself to remain relevant in the current business society? The last part is about results. What's my track record? What is my current results? You may have had a fantastic track record for the first 10 years of your business, and your current results have been a decline ever since. You know, so look at your current results, not just your track record. So current results stand are quite an important factor of building that competence, credibility around yourself. But also having the social proof that surrounds that. So at the moment, for example, I have a speaker agency that is wanting me to sign with them, and the sign-on fee for me to sign with them is quite considerable. So I've asked for some social proof of their track record. I've asked for people to be able to contact and looking for some testimonials. Now at the moment, they're still processing all of that. But at the moment, I'm very unlikely to trust without that social proof of what their results are. So there's a real example that's happening within my business at the moment, where someone is wanting to develop a trusted relationship. And I'm sitting back saying, well, hang on, what's your track record and what sort of social proof is there that this is happening? So the three key components being trustworthy, the concept of character, and the concept of competence. Trust truly is the one thing that changes everything. So ask, how much do you have in the trust bucket? working within business relations, staff and team relationships, and even our personal relationships. Everything that you have in your life that's great has been built on a foundation of trust. So everything great in your life has been built on that foundation of trust. So it comes back to a decision that, do you accept the tax of low trust, or do you want to embrace the dividend of high trust? It's time to identify the areas in the relationships where you work, where you want or need to build greater trust. And then it starts with you. It starts with you. What do you need to do to start building better trust and stronger business relations? Because believe me, that businesses that unlock the trust equation reap the benefits from their customers, their team, and their suppliers, but it all starts with you. Now, in a world where technology just moves at a frenetic pace, we're connected 24/7. We live in a world where an extra 3 seconds on the road can ruin someone's day, where our trust for leaders is diminishing and we're becoming increasingly cynical, where people walk on a stress precipice, walking the tightrope of pressure, where people are jaded by marketing and the media. Imagine if your business was the beacon of trust in your industry. Imagine if your business was the beacon of trust in your community. So there's power in building trust. Now, it doesn't happen overnight, but when you know where to start, you can start working through it, and where you can identify it and where you feel that it is within your business. So as a business, Think and Grow Business offers people the opportunity for a free leadership assessment, which gives you a foundation of then starting to look at how you can better build trust and start your leadership journey. The stronger leader that you are, the greater credibility that you have, and that ultimately leads to a greater ability to build trust with others. I'll hand you back to Caitlin.
Thanks, Tony, for an informative presentation. It is now time for our Q&A session, so please send through your questions for Tony using the text box on screen, and we'll answer as many as we can in the remaining minutes. We've already had a couple come through. I don't trust anyone in business after an early mistake which cost me. I'm not sure if I can ever really trust anyone.
Thanks, Caitlin. Yeah, that's a story I actually hear quite a bit, where people have been shafted by someone or stabbed in the back or whatever terminology that you use. And I always relate it back to a story that I read about that John Maxwell writes about within his book. And he talks about a team member of his that he poured a lot of value, time, invested a lot of time and value into this team member, who ultimately then did the wrong thing. And John had to let him go, and it hurt John, and it was a noticeable hurt. And he said to himself, I'm not going to trust, I'm not going to add value to people. I'm going to stay aloof. I'm going to be the leader that you see but don't get close to, sort of scenario. So he stopped trusting within his team. And fair enough, after about 12 months, he sat back and he reviewed what was happening. And fair enough, he hadn't been hurt by anyone. But he hadn't been helped by anyone either. So that's the challenge that we face when we're in that position. Yes, fair enough, we can put anything in place to make sure that we don't get hurt. But when we operate within that high trust business environment, people tend to help. But people don't help if we're not operating in that high trust. So it is a challenge, but ultimately it's a choice. But that's why the three concepts are so strong, because it's not just a reflection tool, it's not on ourselves, it's how we can build trust and how we can identify trust in others.
Thanks, Tony. Trust takes a lot to earn. Surely you aren't expecting me to trust blindly.
No, certainly not. I don't want you to trust blindly. And, part of me thinks that that's why Stephen Covey released the book called Smart Trust, because I think a lot of people read Speed of Trust and thought, well, that's what I've got to do, and then they've gone out and trusted blindly, and there may have been some consequence. I'm not sure. But yeah, no, I don't want you to trust blindly, because it needs to be smart. When you trust someone blindly, that's when you're really opening yourself up to pain and potentially some stupid business decisions. You know, where you visibly start with someone is with that competence area. You know, what's their track record? What are their capabilities? You know, so that's visible. You know how businesses are tracking. You know what people do. You can see what their abilities are. And as you get to know them, you start to find the invisible parts of that sometimes can be invisible, you know, the parts of character and trustworthiness. You start to build and see that as you work through that business relationship. So my advice, once again, would just be start looking at people with their credibility, credibility on their competence. Do they have a track record? Are they relevant in the industry? Are they maintaining their relevance in the industry? And that's going to start that trust process. But never move far away from your gut instinct. Your gut instinct is huge, but it's also, in this case, backed by a formula that you can follow. And the more you rely on your gut instinct and following the formula, you lessen the chances of getting it wrong. So yeah, I don't want you to trust blindly. I want you to be very smart in how you build those trusted relationships.
Thanks, Tony. Any tips for a solo business owner feeling very scared of being taken advantage of?
Yeah, once again, I work with a number of businesses who are what I call solo flyers. And they do find it hard, especially when they're starting to deal with, as their business grows, they start to deal with businesses that are bigger, that have more complexity, and they feel very scared about being taken advantage of. So it's not something that I'm unaware of. At the end of the day, it's lonely in business, and especially lonely for solo flyers, and they are in a vulnerable position. But my first, one of the best things that I see that's out in the marketplace now is, you know, the networking programs. Well, actually less so networking, more so group mentoring programs. I see the success in them. I'm involved in two separate areas of group mentoring. We have our own mastermind program with Think and Grow Business, but I'm also involved in some government subsidised ones as well. And so what they allow people to do is to join a trusted group of other business owners and start working through some of their own business issues and concerns. And what I ultimately see happen there is, within a very short space of time, it becomes a very clear and trusted network of people helping people grow their business. So as a solo flyer, I would encourage you to join any form of group mentoring program that is out there, and you will start to build trust within that group, and it will start to follow a bit of a logical process. Now, in saying that, I have seen some group programs that fall over because of a lack of trust within the group. But that's all part of your learning, because if you're doing that within a group mentoring program as opposed to real life business, it's actually a lot less costly for yourself, because it's just then your growth stage. So I would encourage you to join a group mentoring program. There are some really good business networks out there that are designed to help, but there are also business networks that put some real onerous tasks on referrals and whatnot. So if you're going to join a group, a business networking group, make sure it's one that doesn't place that onerous stuff onto yourself, because a lot of those solo businesses feel like a lot of their time is taken up getting referrals for other businesses. So my advice would be to join a group mentoring program and then build that trust within that group, and then they become part of that trusted network, so that when you do start moving into negotiations with larger and bit larger sized businesses, you can understand what trust looks like. You can understand how to define it and what it feels like, and that's going to help you with those business decisions.
Thanks, Tony. How do you get from the point of mistrust through building trust to being trusted?
So how do you get from a position of mistrust into being trusted? Okay. Ultimately, to rebuild any sort of trust, and no matter whether this is like in a personal relationship or within a business relationship, to me, and once again, let's focus on that competence area. It's about that delivery. So if you've broken trust with someone, and that's why the trust bucket is so important. If you build trust with people, they're less inclined to operate with suspicion because they know what you're normally capable of. But if you are in that position where you have got that mistrust, it then comes back to your actions, your behaviours, your results and your capabilities. So work on that. Show your trust as opposed to tell them about your trust. So when people say, trust me, that automatically puts me on edge. If someone's sitting there saying, trust me, I'm sort of thinking, oh, okay, should I? But if you're in that position, my advice is you just deliver. Just get out there and deliver what you need and work in that area of capability and results. And as you drive those, that trust will start to come about again. So, and I've seen that so many times in employee-employer situations where someone has breached my trust as a leader in a business to a team member on the floor. And one of the only ways that I've ever seen people regain that trust is through their actions and staying committed to what they need to do. So, and there have been, I've got some really good examples of where people have moved beyond that concept of me not trusting them into a strong position of trust based around what they've delivered and what their results have been.
Thanks, Tony. I'm always after a win-win and pitch my discussions with that in mind, but still people I don't know well will unreasonably doubt my integrity.
Yes, and that's going to happen because within you don't build trust usually on the first or second time that you meet someone. It is a process. Now, the way that I would suggest, if you are genuinely looking for the win-win, that's the whole concept of determining what your win is, but also understanding what their win is. So when you are, and this may not happen on your first negotiation with someone or your first discussion with someone, but when you sit down and you say, if you can verbalise what you believe they're looking for as a win process, and you're pretty close to the mark if you've got to understand them, that's automatically going to build trust with people because they're going to say, wow, you're thinking about me in that negotiation process. So while I would like to believe a lot of people go into a concept of a win-win situation, people will also go into negotiation saying, I want a win-win, but I'm going to start with a ballpark figure because then I've got room to move. So their actions actually, their intent then is different from having a win-win. When you walk into a win-win, you know your winning point and you know their winning point. And then if you work through that process of building trust, building the rapport, gaining the respect of each other and understanding what a win means to both of you, you can certainly move closer. And sometimes it's a question of asking at that very first meeting, what does a win look like to you within this? And hopefully then they're going to ask, well, what does a win look like for you? And, I've seen some negotiations happen within half an hour once those first questions are done, and there's agreement on what the win-win is and it's all over and done with. But that's the exception as opposed to the norm. But if you do go in with a win-win, understand that it's, what your winning point is, but you need to understand what theirs is, and that's where you start to build the trust.
Thanks, Tony. How do you show business trust when you are a new business?
It's incredibly difficult, especially with the world of social media today and You know, you can go onto anyone's Facebook page and you can see what people are saying. There's reviews, and they've got all that. It's about asking for that social proof as you build. So any new business is not going to start in a position where they've got strength of numbers or strength of a business model happening for them. It's all baby steps, it's all tentative steps. But as you start to build that business and as you start to deliver services, don't be afraid of asking those people when they're happy with your service to provide a review back to you, or video testimonial, or whatever the case may be. However you want to show that social proof that you can actually do what you say you do. Because once again, to me, that's the first part of where you want to start with building trust, is showing that you're capable, competent, and you've got some track record. So the sooner you can start to get those testimonials happening for yourself, the sooner that social proof starts to kick in and people start to trust you. And then it, pardon me, then it comes down to that that character and understanding what that looks like as the relationship grows. But yeah, I'd be looking for getting those reviews of your business. Of course, you're not going to ask anyone that doesn't provide that you're not quite sure of, but if someone's talking about how outstanding that your service is or your product is, ask them to do a review on your Facebook page. Get your iPhone and do a quick 30-second video of them, you know, and that's the way that you start to build that social proof so people can start trusting the services that you provide.
Thanks, Tony. That's all the questions we have time for today. On behalf of CCRQ, I'd like to thank Tony from Think and Grow Business for taking the time to present to us today. I'd also like to thank everyone who has joined us for today's session. If you have any further questions for Tony, you can contact him using the information that's up on screen. Don't forget that CCRQ has a range of webinars and events coming up over the next month or so, including Preparing and Managing Business Continuity During Crisis Situations on the 18th of April, and e-workshop, Early Warning Signs of Business Failure on the 19th of April. If you want to find out more about upcoming webinars or e-workshops, go to the CCRQ events page to book your place. Thanks for joining us today. My name is Caitlin Mutzelberg from CCRQ, and I look forward to welcoming you to another CCRQ webinar in the very near future.